Hi, I'm Mariana Restrepo. I'm the Deputy Editor of Buddhadharma. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with members of the Khyentse Vision Project team, Dolma Gunther, the Executive and Creative Director, Casey Ford, the Editorial Director, and Zack Beer, the Translation Team Lead. Today, we'll be speaking about AI and Buddhism, the use of AI in translation of Buddhist texts, as well as the potential use of AI by Buddhist practitioners, and how we should or perhaps should not use AI in our lives and practice. So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. So maybe we can start by introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit about what you do at Khyentse Vision Project and also about Khyentse Vision Project in general. Dolma, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm the Executive Director and the founder of Khyentse Vision Project. It is a relatively new project. It's been now running for about 3 years. So we've kind of just been in the foundational stages of the project, but it is a project to translate the collected works of Jamin Khyentse Wangpo. Khyentse Wangpo is one of the great Khyentses and is the first Khyentse in the lineage of the Khyentse lineage. And we're translating his works, which are about 48 volumes in total. And they cover this extraordinary range from history, geography, poetry, practice material, poems, songs. He really was such an erudite, extraordinary master. So this project is attempting to honor him and do homage to his wisdom and his legacy. So we are an online project. We have a reading room and all of our publications are online. And so far we have a couple of hundred of texts already published, and we're planning to try and get the whole of his works published within the next 10 years.
Great. Zack?
Hi, I'm Zack Beer. I am, as you mentioned already, the team lead of the translation team here at Khyentse Vision Project, and I also translate text myself.
Great. And Casey?
And I'm Casey, and editorial director of Khyentse Vision Project, and I'm in charge of the editorial team, making sure that we have a cohesive workflow, making sure that our texts go to publication successfully with the highest quality, and that all the steps have been taken, necessary steps to be taken along the way to make sure that our texts are reliable, fluent, inspirational, all that sort of thing. So that's really important for our project, is to make sure that we have a step-by-step process to make sure that we can really make sure our texts are of the highest possible quality for Khyentse Vision Project.
Great. So the Khyentse Vision Project team attended the AI and the Future of Buddhist Studies conference a few months ago at UC Berkeley. What were some of the most exciting or thought-provoking moments for you personally, Zack?
Yeah, this conference in Berkeley ended up being something quite monumental, I would say, and seemed to be, I think, for most of us who went there and were involved with it, seemed like some kind of very important step in the world of both Buddhist translation and Buddhist studies, and just like this in Buddhism in general, we're all trying to face and make sense of what AI means. So in terms of what went on in that conference, the biggest moments were the moments of excitement about what we can do with AI on one hand, and the other hand, some other voices bringing in some kind of caution about how AI is going to change the way we do things. So in terms of the excitement, I think at the point of the conference, many of us had started to play around with the large language models like ChatGPT and Claude, and start to get some sense of what they can do. But what was interesting at the conference was a lot of the speakers were talking about what the next steps could be, how we can start to create more tailored, bespoke use of large language models. We'll be using that kind of terminology a lot. In other words, the technology like ChatGPT, how we can use them in a more tailored way not just calling on the knowledge of all of the information and data that ChatGPT calls on, but how we can create more specific kinds of tools that can provide more accurate and efficient information. So I think that comes to a head in the particular tool that's being developed by our colleagues at Berkeley, which is called Dharma Mitra. And so there was a lot of excitement about how we can all participate in actively creating Mitra as a tool for Buddhist studies and Buddhist translation and Buddhist knowledge generally, that can be useful for all of us, and something more than just the general type of knowledge that is being accessed by the other more famous LLMs. So that's on the excitement side. The flip side of it was that there's a lot of reason to be cautious about using these kind of technologies as well. So some of the more thought-provoking conversations came from people who are trying to point out that amid all the excitement about using these tools, there's a lot of reason to think about how it could change the way we do things in Buddhist communities and Buddhist institutions. My colleague from Berkeley, Megan Howard, who's now at NYU in New York, was bringing up some very interesting points about just the way we relate to information, pointing out that historically in Buddhist communities, Buddhist knowledge was revered. We would hold it up, we would keep it off the ground, we would, in case of certain yogis in Tibet, wear Buddhist texts on the crown of their head. So what changes, in other words, when we start to relate to Buddhist knowledge just as data that we're inputting into a system and calling up in a haphazard way? How does that change it? And then, of course, we have to think a lot about just the kinds of information that AI tools are accessing. And so other of our colleagues there, like John Dunn, were pointing out that if we don't input proper, good quality information into the tools, then we're only going to get bad information out.
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially about like a model that's like Buddhist specific. And so Dolma, how did those discussions influence your perspective on that intersection of Buddhism and AI?
I think it really kind of clarified for me the benefits and the dangers. So it kind of brought those into relief very clearly. The discussions were so great and kind of canvassed the whole range of views, from very anti-AI to let's jump on this AI bandwagon and do everything we can with it. So it was super interesting. And I think maybe I'd had some unformed thoughts about the benefits and the dangers, but it really helped kind of crystallize those. And I think to me, it was very exciting, the benefits of AI, the fact that it can help productivity, it can help efficiency, it can increase speed of certain tasks, especially some tasks that are kind of really grunt work that, is in some ways a waste of people's time and energy. So on one level, it can be fantastic. And, to that end, KVP has built a translation tool, which is called a CAT tool, computer assisted translation. So we've kind of built our own tailor-made tool, which should be able to really help our translators get through the 48 volumes of text a little bit faster. So that's a good thing, But on the other hand, the dangers of it, also really are important to keep in mind. And I think, the loss of valuing knowledge, the loss of that kind of sacred view of language that Zack was talking about, and especially that kind of, from a Vajrayana perspective, really keeping the practice element alive in the text. So, not divorcing the translation of texts from the actual sacredness of them and the use of them and the profundity of them, and the fact that experience and realization is essential for translation. You can't get an AI tool to have the same wisdom that a direct experience brings as a practitioner. And I think it's so vital that we keep that in mind, and that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that we keep understanding that these texts are practice paths in and of themselves and are not just, mundane, ordinary texts that we can just use technology for.
Right. And, in terms of like historically, the way that Buddhist texts have been translated has been by practitioners who I don't know, from Tibet went to India or China to India, and when, received the teachings, practiced them, really kind of made them their own to be able to then translate them. So even though there's a tool, helping us with all this like busy work, right? But the experience of the translator and their understanding of the material they're translating is really key in the work that you guys do. So Casey, after the conference, Khyentse Vision Project announced that they established some guidelines for using AI tools in translation. Could you share about what led to these guidelines and what principles they emphasize?
Well, I think Dolma and Zack have already talked a little bit about the kind of the ethical potential issues that come up when we're talking about engaging a new technology like this, that it has so much power in a way. It possesses a huge amount of knowledge that it can get a bit risky, where we might become overly reliant on it as a source of correct knowledge, which actually is not the same as being a source of wisdom. And so this is an issue that we had to take very seriously. Like, how do we embrace the tool potentially while still being mindful of its conditions, its limitations, and its potential consequences on various levels? So this is something we actually ended up consulting with both Khyentse Rinpoche and Jigme Khyentse Rinpoche. And based on their advice, we did decide ultimately that we do want to proceed in engaging and embracing these tools, but also being sure that we, with the caveat of maintaining a certain level of healthy skepticism, I guess, when engaging them, not taking them at face value, and also making sure they don't replace the wisdom and the knowledge accrued by our expert translators, our traditional scholars, our editors, and of course our teachers that we rely on for advice. No matter how much how much knowledge an AI tool can possess and collect, it's not going to be able to practically communicate that within a specific context on its own. So it's kind of like a friend that we have that has a lot of maybe knowledge, but maybe not a lot of real experience. So how do we kind of integrate that into our translation methodologies, our publication plans, all of that sort of thing? So based on that, we realized that we did need to really think all of these kind of potential issues through and place ourselves very consciously about what we're doing with these tools. So based on that, we developed a 5-point policy. The first one being quality, so that we do want to embrace using AI tools to improve our quality. They have various benefits. Not only do can they give draft translations for us for some material, they can also help us with research, with collating information, with cataloging information, collecting metadata. So there's a lot of different uses for them. So in that sense, they can definitely help improve the quality, but at the same time, it's not replacing the expertise of our translators and editors. The second point that we have in our 5-point policy is speed. So we definitely, because our project is entirely reliant on donors, so on Buddhist practitioners who donate to our project, we want to be very conscious about our time and our resources and the use of that. So if there's anything that can help speed up our translation process, that is something we want to take very seriously, something we want to embrace. But again, we do not want to prioritize speed over quality. That is not negotiable to us. Third is integrity. So especially as a project that translates primarily Vajrayana material, transmission is incredibly important to understanding and responsibly translating these texts. So things like receiving the proper instructions, the proper transmissions in the process of translation, we consider to be essential and not something that can be negated in our process. And then, of course, another thing that has been in the news lately is the potential environmental impact. And this is incredibly important to us as well, because of course this is causes and conditions and creating tendrils. So this is something that we take very seriously. So we're trying to continue to research the level of environmental impact of large language models and their development. And then also explore ways that we can actually offset our carbon footprint that's accrued through the use of AI. And in general, I think we're actually trying to move to a carbon neutral project. And maybe Dolma can talk about a bit more about that at some point. And then the fifth point is collaboration. So for us, we want to make sure that we can help the betterment of these AI tools as much as possible, so they are more and more reliable as sources of knowledge, not wisdom, but knowledge for learning about Buddhism. So any Dharma-oriented organizations like Mitra at Berkeley that Zack had mentioned, like Sadra Foundation is also developing a lot of AI-related resources. BDRC is also moving in this direction. So we want to actively engage with them, make sure that we can help contribute to making sure that these tools are the best possible that they can be.
Zack, do you see any unique challenges or opportunities when using AI to translate Buddhist texts?
Yes, let me start with the opportunities. I think we're really just scraping the surface of what the opportunities can be so far. So there's a whole big future ahead of us. Right now, I would say where we are is, you have certain tools like Mitra being developed at Berkeley and Claude, which has learned, for our specific world, has learned Tibetan quite well. And so you can do automated text translation in a way that was just way beyond our imagination a year ago. So what that provides is not a perfect, but a very interesting sort of companion and tool that we can use as translators. It amounts to something like an educated friend now. So you could ask these tools already, how would you translate this passage? And it'll put out something that is, in often cases, like a pretty decent translation, but it's not perfect. So the question then becomes, how do we make use of these tools as translators? It's tricky. This is a question for use of AI in general. Like how much can we trust it? How much can we make use of it? And so we're all learning this as we go along, I would say. Ideally, this makes our work go faster. I think that's the idea. So for sure, there's ways that we can already make use of them in that way. I'm using it towards helping to make glossaries and certain other parts of like the automated automation process of translation. There's certain ways that can go faster. But for just like understanding what Buddhist texts mean, it's kind of an ongoing process that we're learning. You were mentioning a few moments ago, like the long history of, translators traveling, learning Buddhist texts. That's something that we often have in our mind at Khyentse Vision Project. How do we honor the history of how translation has been done, the close relationships that were formed between translators and the panditas, the great scholars and knowledge holders who held the information. And so as far as what the challenges are as translators, I think that's just something that we have to keep in mind. How can we slow it down, make sure we're doing things properly, and how can we keep the important communities and relationships that we have with the older and wiser people that form the basis of genuine Buddhist transmission.
Right. And I'm thinking about also like, my experience as a practitioner of Buddhist texts, like sometimes, the text is condensed in a way, like, a word is just kind of making reference to something that is like way more extensive. And many times, like, the metaphors, the imagery in the text is also kind of like culturally relevant. So translating, you have to take all that into account. You guys have a lot of experience with that. And, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like, how would a machine, how could a machine do that, right? How could a program do that? Because it's a lot of like the human experience that is kind of being transmitted through this text. So I don't know, it's all very interesting. But I guess if we zoom out a little bit and just, beyond translation, right? So as you said, as practitioners, how do we incorporate AI into our life? Should we even incorporate AI into our lives? And so I'm wondering, Dolma, if maybe you guys have hit upon any guidelines or like, I don't know, recommendations or the way that you see it as how as practitioners we can make, good use or not make use of AI in our lives.
I mean, as far as KVP is concerned, we haven't hit upon any guidelines to do with that because it's a little bit beyond our scope to make guidelines for practitioners. But I think we think about it a lot ourselves and we talk about it a lot ourselves. And I think that, from my perspective, AI is going to change the world as much as the internet did. It'll change so many things. And even though on one hand, I hope that there's some practitioners out there who will not use it at all and who will just go and be in a isolated place in a mountain and practice and not be touched by it. And that, I think, is the ideal still for a practitioner. But on another level, the world is happening, it's changing so fast, and there are a lot of us modern practitioners are stuck in the world, and that's kind of what we have to embrace. So I think there's no way around embracing it in the same way that we needed to embrace the internet. And I think it will change a lot of things for practitioners in the sense that, just the image generation or film generation, even that is going to change the world very quickly. But I think particularly, I guess, as Zack and Casey pointed out, I think it will become harder to create space and slowness. And I think that's going to be a whole new challenge for practitioners to really disengage and to really turn it off, And so, it's a bit like a labyrinth. You get lost in the almost miraculous nature of what this thing can do. It can do so much. I mean, it's brilliant, it's creative, it's extraordinary. So there is a lot of potential, I think, for it to be used in really good ways. But again, it comes down to our motivation and our mindfulness and our discipline and really approaching it with the right attitude and the right aspiration, I think, to get the good from it and not get swamped by the negatives.
And yeah, I mean, you just mentioned, video and like filmmaking AI. And so like Casey, I don't know, but, I'm just thinking about like, how AI could be a tool for meditation and mindfulness, but also like, in terms of this visual images, like sometimes I wonder, like when I'm reading through a sadhana practice, I'm like, wow, like could someone like put this into one of those things and then we get like a video generated,
Definitely.
where we're supposed to be visualizing, but like seeing it,
Yeah,
Like-
I mean, aids to practice, right? Just like I can create aids like that to practice, whether it's visual material, whether it's research material as well. So say you're interested in, a meditation instructions in a particular text that hasn't been translated yet, and you're not a translator yourself, and you just kind of want to get a sense, like, is this text right for me, or is this meditation right for me? You can plug that text in, see really quickly an outline, a rough translation, and you can decide whether you want to go deeper. Of course, it's, again, as we've been talking about, one of the main dangers of the over-reliance on these tools is that they're far from perfect at this point. They have huge gaps in their data. They're not, they don't possess wisdom, all these sorts of things. So there's so we have to take them very cautiously. But it's funny because like the gaps in its knowledge often reflects the gaps in human knowledge as well. So, if we are putting into a model bad translations, we're going to be getting bad translations coming out, right? So it's limited by our own information we're giving it. So it's really a reflection of us and our own circumstances. So I think as long as we're keeping that in mind, I think things like, just research study aids is really going to be a huge thing that it can do, that people will have a lot more access to it. I'm thinking like, say you want to teach Abhidharma to high school students, it could help you create a whole lesson plan. It can give you, recommendations for primary sources to reference. It can really help you kind of figure out how to communicate that knowledge to others. So I think there's a lot of potential there in terms of it being a tool to be helpful, but it's not something that we want to rely on as the source of wisdom itself.
Right. And Zack, do you have any kind of ideas or opinions about maybe things that we should avoid? Maybe we shouldn't put their visualization in, an AI because, visualization is there for a purpose. So if we're just watching a TV, film about it, then maybe that's not fulfilling the purpose. So is there, do you have, any thoughts of that?
About what we should avoid. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I think as Dolma mentioned earlier, like we're first and foremost a translation project, so I don't feel like I'm well positioned to tell people what they should and shouldn't be doing with the AI tools. And just generally speaking, I would say that we're kind of at a moment of experimentation with it now. So I don't know. I'm kind of the mind that we should just try out all different kinds of things and see what works and what doesn't work. There's a lot of things that it's very amazing at, and other things that it's not really that good at. And so, I mean, if I'm just thinking about advice that I would have for other people and Buddhist practitioners who are approaching these kind of technologies, I would encourage people to play around with it in different ways and play around with it and try to test the boundaries of it a little bit. Like what I mean by that is like if you can, you know, I think there's like a tendency to try to explore like what is just the potential of really far out things that you couldn't have imagined doing before. You know, you're not an artist. You can all of a sudden create art really well. But try asking some of these AI tools about questions that you do know about, and you'll start to push against the boundaries of what it can do and what it can't do much quicker. If you have knowledge about something and you can start to ask questions about something you do know quite well, then you can start to see a little bit how the AI tools work, how they're just trying to predict like what an intelligent answer would be. And then I think you can start to use the tools more intelligently, and you'll probably end up a little bit less intimidated by using them as well. One really silly example of it is like I play a lot of word games online when I'm bored, and so you'll play some kind of anagram game where you'll be faced with the question of like, what are all the words you can make with these 5 letters? And sometimes I feel stumped, and I'll put it into ChatGPT to try to help me out. Like, what are all the words that you can come up with these 5 letters? And it's remarkably bad so far at answering questions like this. Like, it will keep continuously giving me answers of words that like include letters that are not on the list that I just provided it to, or give me like 6-letter words when I told it to only give me 5-letter words and things like that. So this just goes to show, you know, you can start to see how it is trying to predict answers. It doesn't have like, let's say, a kind of like awareness or intelligence of its own. You know, it works basically by trying to predict answers to a line of, you know, a line of text, essentially. So I think if Buddhist practitioners start to use it in that way, you can start to make better, more skillful use of it. And also, you know, I think interesting for practitioners, it starts to get us closer to the question of like, just like what consciousness is and what awareness is, which is a fundamental question, I think, as Buddhists that we're all trying to answer all the time. It runs you up into some very interesting philosophical questions pretty quickly.
Right, and that reminds me of, you know, something that Khyentse Rinpoche, who is one of KVP's advisors, like I heard him, you know, he's been talking about AI in the past years, kind of more increasingly more, and I heard him say something that, you know, like, oh, AI is like great news for Buddhist practitioners, and I was like, huh, like, okay, how so? And you know, he mentioned that AI will really force us to reflect deeply on the nature of self and what self actually means. So could you guys unpack that idea a little bit for us?
So I wouldn't want to speak to what Rinpoche meant necessarily, but I can definitely mention what it brings to mind for me. I mean, I guess similar to what Zack had said, you know, this tension between knowledge and awareness, knowledge and wisdom. You know, what is the difference? What does it really mean to be aware? You know, are we presuming that AI will always be incapable of sentience, and why? Right? These are things that are already questions that are happening in society at large. And it's a really great opportunity for us in a way as people that are, specialists in at least asking these questions, right? And that's what we're spending most of our time doing. So, hearing these stories about AI exhibiting volition and exhibiting self-interest, does this qualify? Are we already there? And if so, what would that mean? And, just thinking about, okay, if it is sentient or capable of being a vessel for a mind stream, then the good news at least is it could become a Buddha. So I guess that's all right for us. That's good news for us. But this is definitely something, at least in my opinion, definitely Buddhist leaders should be engaging in more in the coming years. This is really, there's a place for us in engaging the stakeholders of kind of AI development and what this means for us consequentially as a species of, what differentiates us really from something that is looking very similar in some ways. So.
Right. And Dolma, is there something that really excites you about the future of AI and its relationship to Buddhism?
I guess for me, in some ways, when I think about it, sometimes I get really excited, but mostly only from the context of thinking about it just as a Vajrayana practitioner, you're supposed to think that all phenomena is a reflection of the guru, right, for example, or the deity. And AI is no exception to that. And so sometimes I start to, think about the future and think, if we could really have that attitude, and if our aspiration and our pure vision is strong enough, there's no reason why AI can't manifest as a teacher or manifest in a way that helps beings get enlightened, because that's what we're trying to visualize the whole phenomena doing, right? So, sometimes I think if we had the right motivation and the right attitude, why wouldn't an AI be capable of being inseparable from the mind stream of your teacher, or a Buddha? And maybe it could manifest that maybe it could discover dharmas, maybe it could really be something that could become, something that's inseparable from a wisdom being. I mean, why not? That's kind of what we're praying for, right? So I think it really depends on us and our motivation. And if enough sentient beings have a sacred attitude towards it and the right aspiration and have the right kind of prayer force, I'm sure it could do some really, really remarkably wonderful things. I doubt that that's going to happen en masse, and so it's a pity. But I do think, the potential's there. Like, the whole nature of phenomena is so magical in some way, and I think it could manifest in a really exciting, extraordinary way. And I like to think about it more in those terms, in terms of my own relationship with it, and how I use it. I like to treat it with, as part of my practice and part of my pure vision approach as much as possible.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the possibilities are really literally endless. So why not? And so just, to finish up, is there anything you guys want to share with our audience? Any final thoughts on AI, Buddhism, or how we can all navigate this evolving landscape? Who wants to go first?
I might jump in with just one thing. I think it's really, in terms of translation projects, the work that Dhamma Mitra is doing, which is trying to, get their own tools specifically catering for Buddhist texts and Vajrayana texts in particular. I think that's so critical, and I think it's really great if more and more people understand the value of what they're doing, and the work that they're doing, and the kind of, the conference really gave us this sense of huge responsibility, that this is the moment in history where we can actually really make these tools have more integrity, and it depends on what we feed it. And Dhamma Mitra has, this wonderful aspiration to make sure that we're not getting lost in the messiness of a general AI tool that isn't catered to the expertise required. So I feel like the more support for Dhamma Mitra, the better, and the more appreciation for the work that, Sadra is doing, Dhamma Mitra is doing, that we're trying to help with by, constantly reviewing our translations, constantly trying to make them better quality, more accurate, so that they can go into this Dharma Mitra tool and make it really genuinely better for future generations. So this is like a crucial turning point, and it's so critical that we have organizations like Dharma Mitra doing the work that they're doing. Otherwise, it really would just be the lowest common denominator, and you'd be out with the general AI tools, which are just not capable of doing what hopefully Dharma Mitra will be able to do.
I would echo that. Yeah, I think there's a tendency now to have the feeling that all of this technology is moving so fast and we're being like swept along in a current that's outside of our control. But there are concerted efforts, as we've been mentioning several times, especially Mitra at Berkeley, that is, trying to create some real movement for the sense that we can participate in it as Buddhist scholars and Buddhist practitioners. We can actively participate in creating a more meaningful type of AI that we are shaping, and that will be actually quite useful for the future.
And I just mentioned, that there are also so many tools that can already do such amazing things when we're thinking about working with texts in particular. I mean, as we all know, there's millions and millions of pages of wisdom that still haven't been translated, still aren't available to the vast majority of Buddhists. And this is it's such an exciting time for that, because in an instant we can do things already that was previously unimaginable that we would be able to do. Things like automatic cataloging, automatic critical editions, digitizing manuscripts that were previously illegible is something that BDRC has been working on using AI tools. It's absolutely incredible. So we're getting more access to more wisdom through these tools as well. So it's not just about translation as well. It's this whole world of tools that are going to really help us get more access and hopefully see more links between texts as well, more connections between that, and by consequence, connections between communities, Buddhist communities. And so seeing these connections, kind of understanding a better sense of our history and our texts will hopefully set us up for kind of a better present and a better future of Buddhism as well.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. This was such an interesting conversation, and I can't wait to see how everything kind of evolves and the work that you guys will do in the future using all these tools. So thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you, Mariana.
Thanks so much, Mariana.